Hey, I'm ZSH Plays, welcome back to San Bernardino Zoo, and welcome to a brand new area, the islands. I can't wait to get stuck into this. Let's take a look at where we're going to be building. So way off in the distance, away from the Amazonian area that we just finished, will be where the islands is going to sit. So let's get our drone over there and take a look at the area that we're going to be building in. Just next to the water terraces here will be the Australian area, and then way over in the distance here will be the islands. So let's start building and I'll tell you all about it. So I've had the concept for this area since day one of San Bernardino Zoo, but the addition of the Lar Gibbon and loads of new tropical foliage just made me really want to get stuck into this area of the zoo first instead. So I've left space for the Australian area and we're going to get on with the islands today. So the concept for the area is based on the chain of islands that sit just above Australasia, which is why it's next to Australia, the Malayan archipelago, Indonesia, etc. And the area is actually going to be made out of islands as well, sat in a lake. So I'm just building the first of them here, using a section of jungle from the jungle path because I was so pleased with how it turned out. I thought it'd work really well for an island. And I'm going to build a temporary habitat around it just so that we can check how much space we have in this particular area. So we're looking at 240 meters squared there. So another one of these, and maybe a smaller island, and I think we'll have enough room for the gibbons. I've got some sort of measuring around it, just made with basic pieces, so I can make sure that the path never gets too close to the islands for the gibbons to be able to jump out. And then we'll copy this across and get the second island in. We're going to be doing a lot of decorating to this. I just really like the basic arrangement. We're also going to get paths running between the islands as well, so that the guests can walk all the way around the lake and through the lake. And then we're going to start making it actually look like islands by using the stalactite pieces. So these are the same pieces from the mud walls by Zoo that I used, but rather than use those mud walls again, I'm going to use this one piece which has got a really nice sloping side to it, and just rotate this and copy this all the way around the island, which I've raised off the floor a bit, and it's going to end up looking a lot like the reference pictures of islands for gibbons and lemurs, etc. That I've been looking at. And then we'll start putting the lake in. So as always, we'll dig down to a 2-meter piece so we get a nice depth, and then we're just going to use the flatten to terrain tool to copy this all the way around the area, and the paths will sort of give us a natural side to the lake anyway. It's going to be pretty rough looking to start with, so we'll need to smooth them all off. We want to get a nice big body of water in here so that the islands look really impressive and so that the gibbons aren't going to jump off them and get onto the paths. Now, they might not be able to get onto the paths, but they will be able to swing over the paths, much like the capuchins in Amazonia, but it's going to look even cooler here because they will be brachiating and swinging and all the cool stuff that they do. So we've got the water in. Now we're going to carry on working on the sides of the island. This stalactite piece is so cool. The way it slopes up on the end, I think it's the largest stalactite piece. Once you sink it into the water, you really get the impression that this is either mud or some sort of poured concrete or something like that that zoos use to keep the soil and everything else onto the island and make sure it just doesn't go into the water. And then we'll simply copy that across and line that up with the other island. And we'll be doing a whole lot of work to make sure that each island looks unique and not like it's just the same island copied. We'll have all sorts of different trees and things like that. But before we do that, we need to do something I have never done before in this game, which is place a frontier blueprint. This is one of the new natural brachiation pieces, and it is absolutely chock full of climbing. And I'm assuming, seeing as Frontier made it themselves, the climbing's actually going to work properly. So with this level of climbing, rather than build it myself, I'm actually going to use their blueprint and then just basically tear it to pieces, remove loads of the sort of South American looking stuff, add loads of stuff that makes it fit in with our current build that we're doing here, but basically keep it so that we've got all that nice climbing there. And when I finished, it shouldn't look like the original blueprint, but we'll have a whole load of climbing that works really nicely. So what we're going to do now is start joining it up with our other island using a mixture of the vines that you see here and some of the wires that we designed for the capuchin habitat in Amazonia. That'll make a really nice mix. I'm also going to put in an amazing custom tree made by Romana Palacios. Here it is. It's so good. He's got a whole pack of enormous palm trees, which I've been itching to use, but they are so expensive to place. I haven't been able to afford it so far, but I've saved up enough money to place these in. And then we're going to put this running all the way across the path so that the gibbons can swing above the heads of the guests. Now, the issue we have in Planet Zoo is how do we get them to spend as much time as possible swinging over the heads of the guests rather than just sitting on one island or sitting on the floor. So the way we're going to handle that is to make it so that one of the islands contains all of their food and food enrichment, and the other island contains all of their toy enrichment, and that gives them a reason to go between each island. And because obviously they are islands, the only way they can get between them is to use the climbing that we've just built for them. So let's get stuck into the enrichment side of things. So the island we see here is where their food enrichment is going to go. So we'll start with the forage box. I want this to be completely invisible, so we're going to place this down and then just work on how we can get it so that it's going to be completely invisible, but the gibbons are still going to use it. So we need to have the top of it just poking through like this, and then you can still see little bits of the wood chippings where their food is. And then we will position the edges of it so that it's hidden as much as possible by the stalactites around the side. And then we'll go in and move the stalactites to cover it up so that the side of the island is slightly raised here. You won't even notice it when you look at it, but it just completely hides the borders of the forage pool. And then we'll put one of the other feeders here, and then we'll move over to the other island and start putting toys in. So we've got a monkey-proof sprinkler there, and we've got this disco ball, which I don't think I've ever used before, but we're going to hide this and put some Balinese-themed pieces in to make some really nice custom enrichments. I want loads of custom enrichments on this island. This is going to be one of the little hole feeders that monkeys and quite a few animals have in zoos, where they have to sort of dig about to get little roots and shoots and things like that out of it. So we're going to use one of the new pitcher plants, a couple of the new pitcher plants actually, one of the tiny little, I think it's Himalayan birch branches. There's this tiny little thin twig, there it is, which is really good for stuff like this. So this will be one enrichment. We've got a mirror hidden away behind one of the trees in the background. And then we're going to make a non-functioning enrichment, which is just something copied from a real zoo, which I really liked. We're going to use the new bark pieces for this. It's like a feeder, again, that they have to dig around in. Almost looks like a domino when it's finished, but it's got various different holes, which will have various different little foodstuffs in, maybe little grubs or something like that, and they have to dig in to get them out. We're using the full stop from the font pieces, which is not something I do very often, but it's absolutely perfect for this little hole. And yeah, that's looking really cool. Let's get on to actually making this place work. So this beautiful tree by Romana Palacios isn't climbable because it's custom. So we'll put some of the new lianas up the side and then just fiddle around with these until we can get the gibbons from the floor up onto their climbing wire. It took so long to get the climbing working throughout this entire habitat. I will spare you most of the footage of that. It was just me moving things, swearing, moving them again, swearing, moving them again, until eventually everything was showing up as climbable, and then doing even more adjustments once the gibbons were in the habitat. Sometimes it's easier just to place the climbing element like this vine down and then move the tree so it meets it rather than trying to do it the other way around. Next up, we're going to put the barriers in and turn this into an actual habitat. So we'll be using exclusively null barriers for this, surrounding all the areas, including the climbing area, to make sure they don't show up as escaped. And then we're going to extend it out at the back here so we can incorporate a temporary shelter. Now I say temporary because I did not have time to build the shelter for this build. You might have seen on the community wall, I was away in Amsterdam visiting Artist Zoo last weekend, which was absolutely amazing. I loved it. I can't recommend it highly enough. So I did not have a lot of time to build this week, but I really wanted to get the most important parts of the habitat done. So I'm just throwing together a vaguely Indonesian looking shelter here. This is going to be replaced by something much more impressive very soon, but it will give us what we need to get the habitat working. Let's take a look at it from the drone. That's what we've got so far. Let's move on to the final stage of getting the habitat side of things working. So we need one place somewhere where the keepers can actually get onto the island, because sadly in Planet Zoo they can't just put on a pair of waders and wade out to the island. We need some land. So what we need to do is have some land which doesn't look like land. That is the challenge. We're going to try and completely disguise this little bit of land here so it looks like it is still water and the keepers can still get in, but the gibbons can't get out. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to take advantage of one of the mechanisms that Planet Zoo has, which is, although keepers have collision detection inside habitats with the objects that you place down, there's an area of about, I don't know exactly how big it is, maybe 2 to 4 meters right in front of the habitat gate, where they will essentially ignore anything and walk straight through it. However, that doesn't apply to the animals. So if we put a load of bushes and things like that here, the keepers will walk straight through it when they come into the habitat, but the animals will not be able to get past it. So it will still keep them in. And then on the bit of land in between those two things, we're going to cover it up with waterfalls and special effects pieces and make it look like it is just a continuation of the lake. This took ages to get right, but I'm really happy with how it works in the end. I think it's pretty seamless, especially from where the guest path is, which is the most important thing. So I'm just going to spend ages mucking around with different bits of foliage, waterfalls, different special effects pieces, until we can make it look like this is just some running water and not actual land and not part of the habitat. We've got the main waterfall in there. We get a few more plants around it to start to disguise the outline of it, and then we will copy this waterfall over to the other side and bridge the gap. We'll grab the waterfall, spin it round, and then drag it across to the other side, and then just position this so it's completely covering the remains of the terrain. And then we'll use some of the special effects pieces. We've got some water splashes here, and then we'll use this really nice piece, which is the murky waterfall bottom from the South America pack, just to get a bit of colour in there. And then we'll start moving the stalactites and rearranging them so that they more obviously end where the island looks like it ends. And then once it's finished, we'll get rid of all these temporary walls and a few more adjustments. And there we go. You can't see that there's any more land there. Just looks like more water and a few plants. Really happy with how that came together. I want this area to be the most beautiful part of the zoo that we have done so far. We're going to be going crazy with Balinese architecture and making it incredibly lush and jungly. We're doing a lot more of that starting in the next episode to really bring this to life. Before we do that, however, it is time for Franchise Masters. You're probably aware that in update 1.13, Frontier added in a new option to do with climbable items. You may or may not be aware of how incredibly useful that is. So for the longest time, maybe since it came out, I don't know, I haven't had the game since it came out, there's been an issue in the game where if you use climbable items to build a fence, if that's anywhere near a habitat, the animals will basically glitch through the walls, even if they're solid concrete, and get onto the climbable piece and then basically escape. And in update 1.13, Frontier added in the option to turn off climbing on any piece you like, and that opens up a whole new world of pieces that we can use to build fences, along with loads of other cool stuff that I'm going to be exploring in a video pretty soon, I think. But the main thing for this Franchise Masters tip is you can now use climbable items as close to the habitat as you like, and then just turn off climbing and the animals won't escape. So I'm going to take advantage of that to build a wooden fence here. Now we're going to be using a mixture of the new liana pieces and some of the climbable branches from the habitat panel, and just creating a really cool, quite gnarly looking fence. I'm just going to muck around with these pieces for ages until I get something that I like the look of. I don't have any real plan going on here. I just want something random looking and interesting visually so that we can use this as a fence throughout the habitat. We're basically just going to copy this one piece all the way around, and then later on we're going to add a load more detailing to it. And in order to save time, rather than just building the fence, we're going to build the sides of the lake and some plants to go in front of the fence. And then once we've got one piece of it looking exactly how we want it, we will group it all together and then start copying it around the habitat. Just using a bit of buffalo grass here, we'll copy this across the front of the fence to really soften the join between the path and the fence and make it look really nice. And then we will do the most important thing, select it and change climbing to disabled, and now we have a fence that is not going to cause us issues. That is the build pretty much done. I'm really happy with how this looks so far. Obviously we've got a lot of detailing to do around the paths and the outside, but these islands look really beautiful. Let's get the gibbons in and take a look at them. Oh, I love these little dudes so much. They are so cool. I think these are definitely my favourites compared to the Siamang. I think it's because the Lar Gibbon and the white-cheeked Gibbon, which is very similar, I see in zoos a lot. The Siamangs are a lot rarer, certainly in Europe, where I am. And yeah, just the way they swing and how cute they are. They're just a really amazing addition to the zoo. I'm so happy they're in here. I'm sorry that the build isn't quite finished. I asked you guys quite a while ago now, when I was thinking about going to 2 weekly episodes, what you would rather see. And the winner by quite a long way was that you would rather see weekly videos even if the build wasn't finished, rather than waiting 2 weeks for each episode. So I guess this is the tester for that, but I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.